This episode is brought to you by Trident Coffee, the veteran-owned brand where every sip inspires you to live life full steam ahead. At Trident, they are more than just coffee, they are storytellers. It's crafted by veterans. Their instant cold brew is perfect for those who serve, those who have served, and anyone who values wellness. Featuring natural ingredients like organic mushrooms, adaptogens, and nootropics, it's more than just a morning pick-me-up. It's your new wellness ritual. Enjoy it at home or on the go, wherever your day takes you. Trident Coffee isn't just about great-tasting coffee. It's about empowering you to be the healthiest version of yourself, because great veterans make great citizens. Try their instant cold brew coffee today and taste the freedom of wellness. Remember, when you choose Trident, you're not just choosing coffee. You're choosing a path of connection through health and wellness. Use promo code DTD15 for 15% off your order. There's that. Okay. All right. This week, Ayman Kafel'S. What's up, my friend?
Hey, how you doing, DJ?
Man, I'm so happy that you're here. And the reason I'm so happy that you're here is, we got in touch with each other through Chuck Ritter, and he said, man, you got to talk to this guy. There's some crazy things going on with him. And I thought, okay, I've heard some crazy stories. And then I got a hold of your book. Yeah, there's some crazy shit that's going on that we got to talk about in this. Just from humble beginnings. And the only way that I can, start this whole thing off, there's a quote in your book that says, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he does not become a monster himself. And I think that holds true through your entire book on you, fighting to keep that monster at bay and still keep that razor sharp edge to you. But I want to go all the way back, 5 years old, Lebanon, a civil war going on. You talk about in the book that you see artillery being shelled in the mountainside beside you, militias coming through the town that you're in. Let's just talk about that and kind of your first images of life, because when you're hitting 4 and 5 and 6 years old, those are really the first memories that kind of take hold in a person. So can we talk about how you grew up, and then we'll kind of compare it to as you come into the United States?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, so it's pretty wild that, like you said, my first memories of childhood is literally the artillery hitting sides of the mountain near my family's village, and then seeing the militias coming through, and I distinctly remember seeing some of the young men in the village running through the village, kind of like if you want to think about Paul Revere, like the British are coming type of thing, except they were yelling out the militia names at the time, and they would, me being 5 years old, obviously scared the shit out of me, running home crying to my mom. And those were like the early childhood memories that I had of Lebanon. I mean, most of the memories, even like I couldn't tell you how we traveled in Lebanon, because that part of my brain or that part of my memory just isn't even there. I just remember the distinct artillery shells, and I was actually with the artillery shells. What I remember is I was playing with one of them old school pedal cars. I remember back in the day, they were, little toy cars, but except you pedal. And that's what I was playing with. And I ended up leaving that and running home, when those artillery strikes hit the mountains.
Well, here's the thing that I want to kind of bring up, because when you talk to kids from the United States from back in that time period where these civil wars are going on, the stuff that I remember is mostly from the movies, mostly from news reports and things like that are going on. And I don't think people, if they've not really taken a deep look into it, understand how torn apart that country was. And I don't just mean the fighting and the civil war that's going on. I mean the actual infrastructure, the actual buildings and the public services and things like that. So not only did you survive civil war in Lebanon, but also Liberia. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So because the war, civil war going on in Lebanon, a lot of my family were living in Liberia, just opening up businesses and doing various things. to make ends meet. And I remember my dad, when he went down there, he worked in like a Sony store that his dad, my grandfather, owned, and my dad also worked at a factory, some I think wheat or flour factory. I don't remember exactly which one, but at the time, you're talking early '90s when Charles Taylor rose into power in Liberia and had a very violent civil war slash coup to overthrow the government. And I have a lot of good memories in Africa and Liberia, going to the beach and doing, a lot of the things. But when that civil war broke out, I remember going, my dad grabbing us and going down the stairs and, in the apartment building we were living in, and to get us out of there. And I remember a soldier jumping out of some sort of military truck. My mind wants to say like a deuce and a half type of vehicle, and a grenade landed right under him and blew him into pieces. And then, like, after that, I don't remember how we got to the U.S. I just remember landing in the U.S. after that.
Okay, so here's the comparison where I kind of want to start doing it. So you're 5 years old in Lebanon. How old are you when you're in Liberia?
7, 8 years old.
Okay, so at least we can say 4 to 8 years old. We have some memories of everything that's going on. I mean, you specifically remember certain things that are going on. Here's the question that I have, and I thought about it a lot when I was reading the book. You don't really have anything to compare it to. Like, you're 4 to 8 years old. There's not really that much to compare it to. I'm sure there wasn't a lot of, things that they were showing the Western world and things like that. So how do you kind of compartmentalize that, one, as the kid, and then as you get older, how you compartmentalize it?
That's a good question. So I think I don't so much compartmentalize it. I just, the memories come all the time, day in and day out. They just appear, and it's just something I've learned to live with, those types of memories. And, I never, as a kid, you never learn to repress them. So they just happen just to keep coming and coming and coming. So it's not really I compartmentalize them. It's more I just accept them because that was part of my childhood.
Okay, so here would be the part, though, where I would say, when you talk to a kid growing up where I did or whatever, and they say, yeah, I had a great childhood, you remember the pedal car and stuff like that. So there are memories, the beach, different things like that. But you would ask a kid where I grew up in, suburban America, hey, did you have a good childhood? Yeah, I remember I had these toys, or I didn't have this, or I used to do this. It's not really the same for you. But I guess my question would be, does it bother you? Like at the time, because you really, like I said, don't have anything to compare it to. So do you look back on it and go, yeah, I had a good childhood, barring, all of that aside? When you look deep into the childhood, do you think it was good? Like relationships with the family, relationships with siblings, all of that kind of stuff. Do you think that was a good thing in the past?
So I'd say when I came to the U.S., things became a lot better,
Okay.
growing up in the U.S., right? So
Okay.
overseas, not so much, right? Overseas, I didn't really have, overseas in Liberia, there was still like, I went to a private Catholic school, and the nuns there still beat you. You're talking those late 80s, So,
Right.
so it's not like I had really those types of great memories. My good memories are all in the U.S., right?
Okay. So
I
here,
grew up here.
So here's where I want to kind of break that apart, and I want to start kind of deconstructing the family, because there is a lot of family stuff in this book and a lot of crazy stuff that you wouldn't think happened. The reason I bring up, did you have a good relationship with the family? It seems like you say when you got to the United States that that's when you remember things getting better, it being a better life. But it almost seems like that's where the tear in the family fabric started to happen, because just in reading the book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there was coming to America for your parents and seeing, getting out of the Civil War and raising that family and stuff. But I don't think they bought into the whole American dream. Am I wrong in thinking that?
No, you're not wrong. I think what they thought was gonna happen is just kind of keep us separate, like culturally, from everybody else, type of isolation, which you can't do in the US, right? You go into the schools, you're amongst people here, and you just, as a kid, kids, we absorb like sponges, right? Our surroundings and everything. And they did not anticipate how much we grew in the US versus growing up overseas, right? And we, meaning me and my siblings, especially me, as I got older, the relationship with my parents got a lot worse, right? So when I say good memories, I mean, my cousins, my friends, stuff like that, where I actually had friends, growing up and stuff like that. But in terms of the relationship with but yeah, over the years, as I was growing older, I started to see a lot of hypocrisy and flaws in their thinking. And whether, they always called it, oh, you're being Americanized and whatever else. But to me, it's just, I've learned to have a more open mind because I needed to, right? Because we were in a brand new country and I needed to kind of assimilate to that country, I guess if you want to call it that way, and really learn how to grow up in my new home, if you want to call it that.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to break the parents kind of apart right now, and we're going to kind of dig into each one of them,
Yep.
especially with your mom. I agree with you. I think that she very much so wanted to keep those old memories, those old customs, all of that kind of stuff. So here's where the normal person reading the book, and including myself, it's hard to understand. And I don't know if as you've gotten older, you've talked to them about it or discussed with your siblings. It's hard for me to understand why you would come here and live in America and bring your family if you don't buy into that country. If you're not, because I feel like of all of the parents, of all the siblings, your mom was the most stringent against it.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. And I think part of it is, um, she didn't want us to go anywhere, essentially, right? Because I remember growing up, looking at colleges and stuff like that. Oh, she didn't want me to move out of the house at all, because she wanted to keep control of what I'm exposed to, this entire time. And, she was very, very much the control type, as I was growing up. Like, no matter what, I remember, because she wanted me to be so much like in the culture, which, don't get me wrong, it's great. It's a great culture and very, very hospitable, and it has honor and all the good stuff, all the good qualities. But th those qualities that she wanted were like to the extreme, right? Where, oh no, you can't have any friends. It would be called outsiders. No outsiders in the family, right? It only had to be Lebanese or some sort of friend from that region. I couldn't have any other friends, So it was very, very back and forth with her a lot between me and her. And I do talk to her about it even to this day. And it's funny, even 30, 40 years later, she still has that same mentality.
Well, and that's what I want to kind of point out. So at one point, your mom tells you, "I will never support you." Talking about military, police, things that you've gone down, major paths that you've gone down in your life. I got to kind of understand because I didn't grow up in that. I know other people that have, but to understand, to have the person that's supposed to have your back the most, to support the things you do and turn you into a good person, to have them do that, you got to kind of talk how you work through that, how you write that in your brain, because you talk about being angry and alone and stuff a lot in the book, but I can't even imagine something like that.
Well, so to me, it turned into more of, I'm just gonna do what I'm gonna do, right? Where even no matter what she says, I mean, at first, yeah, hurtful, and it was very disappointing, and I was pissed off that my own mother wouldn't support, some of my decisions, and I just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go do it, and I think that's the side of me that just decided to actually let go, to let go of that family connection I had with both my parents, because I felt like I there's something I needed to get done, and I just went and did it.
Okay, so let's talk about your father a little bit because it's going to lead into some of the decisions you made. Your father seems like he assimilated, as the word you used, a little more to the culture. He didn't seem to dissuade you from decisions you were going to make or try and push you away from them, but I don't think he definitely supported you in them. Are we right on that?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, one of the examples I think I wrote in my book is, while at boot camp, I was graduating boot camp, Army boot camp, and you get to tell your family this is where you got to be, and these hotels you can stay at, and just the timeline and everything. And I'll never forget, I was on the payphone on base and over at Fort Sill, and I talked to him. I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm graduating in the week. Here's all the information. You can, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, the whole family can come down." And he told me that they're not coming. So I graduated boot camp and AIT, so my specialty school. Um, I did them all at once, so it was like 3.5 months I was away from home, um, without anybody around when I graduated, no family. And it was like, it was to me like numbing me over and over and over again as I went through these processes, whether, went into the military or policing. It just kind of made me, I guess, numb to even think about, family support.
So, what's it like to be in basic? And you say it in the book that not a lot of letters, not a lot of phone calls, to kind of be out there trying to prove yourself. This is the first time you're really a man when you go to basic training and stuff.
Yeah.
And to have no support behind you at all. Does it drive you harder in your training? Like you can't fail at this? Or does it take your eye off the prize every once in a while because you're trying to focus on a pretty important thing on the side here?
Actually, it drove me to be a lot more successful, right? It was one of those things. I remember my dad used to, during our arguments or yelling back and forth, he would say to me, "Oh, I don't need you as much as you need me, and you can never leave this house because you don't know what you're doing," and stuff like that. So in my head, I took it as a challenge. I said, "Oh, okay, well, we'll see what happens, right?" And this is, the young teenager in me, the rebel, I guess if you want to call it. But that always kind of stuck by me. And even at basic, with the lack of letters or even phone calls or whatever I would do, I used that to push me, because yes, I could not fail, right? There's no way I could fail in anything that I decide to do, because to me it was more about, one, improving myself, but at the same time proving them wrong, that I am capable of these things, or the decisions that I made were right, and I didn't have to subscribe to the typical, family mentality.
So let's say they're supportive parents. They love you. They give you everything that you wanted when you get here to America. Are you a different person these days?
I think if everything was given to me and I was allowed to do whatever I wanted to do, I think I'd be a different guy, sitting before you. Definitely, because because like everybody, our childhood shapes us into who we are. You can either, whether you had a troubled childhood or a good childhood, and I think those who are forged in that fire come out even stronger. Versus the cookie. We see it all the time on the job, right? The individuals who had the cookie cutter life, no real stresses, nothing, everything's great. But the minute they deal with one minor stressful event, they just come apart, right? Where me and others are. shaped differently because we've gone through what we've gone through, in our childhoods and became the men who we are today. It really made us stronger.
And I would completely agree with you. I think it changed your parenting style though, and we'll get into that a
Yeah,
little bit later and how you handled things. And
yeah,
I kind of want to talk whenever you get home from basic and you've done this thing. There's got to be a lot of tension in the house, first of all. And then I want to compare that and kind of contrast it to I feel like reading the book that your siblings really supported you. And I think they kind of felt the same way you did about life. They might not have made the same kind of decisions, but they kind of felt the way you did about what was happening in this family. So, can we talk about when you come home, you've got on one side of the story tension with mom, dad, the community at large, and then the support from your siblings and the love and understanding that's there from them.
yeah. So when I came home, there was definitely a lot of tension in the house, and my siblings, 100% right. They were so proud and happy to have, their oldest brother back home and, in my uniform and all that cool stuff. They loved it all, right? And they were young at the time. Talking to them now, and it's funny actually. I recently went to a wedding where all my cousins, the girls, they all grown up now and they're all getting married and everything. So now that makes me feel a lot older. But, back in the day when they were young, I used to babysit all my little cousins and my brothers and sisters and all that. And they, they would tell me how much of an impact I had on their lives. And I never really realized it because they saw me as, and this is from one of my cousins. She said she saw me as kind of like this, strong guy to protect them, and at the same time, they were able to talk to me about anything and have fun. And I gave them, I guess, I gave them what they should have, right, as a childhood, where yeah, go have fun, enjoy yourselves. You guys are all kids. Where I wasn't as strict as the old school parenting style, if you want to call it. So my siblings, even to this day, my sisters will call me every once in a while, and they'll watch some, you know, military action movie or something, and they'll say like the main character is like totally like me and whatever else. So it's just funny seeing that, and when they talk about these things, it doesn't dawn on me and on most people, where it's true when, like that saying goes, that you never know who's looking at you as you're growing up. And it's true, and I got to see it firsthand, last month at this wedding.
Well, I the question that's really on my mind about you joining the military is you're not from here. You came here, you I would say didn't have, that background, that patriotism background that most that join. What was the reason that you wanted so bad to join the military? And I think it was a couple different things. So I would like you to say sometimes in the book I got the feeling it was kind of a, if I can say, a fuck you to your parents that you're gonna do it and you're gonna, like, that could be the most extreme thing you could do is fight for this country. Then on other parts of it, you wanted to ride that line because you joined the National Guard so that you could come back, still be in that community, but still protect the US. So can you kind of give us the background behind it and the idea behind it?
Yeah, the idea was more than just like, fuck you to the parents, but it was more about that this is my home now. And like you said, I did want to balance it at the time where I was considering whether active duty, National Guard, and at the time I was like, all right, let me see if I can still appease the parents, or the community and just do the National Guard. That way, they don't see me like completely gone, So I wanted to kind of find that balance, which it didn't work at all, obviously, because even being in the National Guard, it was still like oh, you're in the army and whatever else. And never mind when, when I got my orders to go to war, that was a whole another thing. But early on, yeah, it was more for me because especially after September 11th, to me, I was like, man, that shit I saw overseas, when I was a kid, now came home. Being, yeah, I wasn't born here, but to me, this became my home. Because to me, Lebanon was never my home, or Liberia was never my home because of the civil wars that broke out. So I never really got childhood to grow up in those countries versus here in the US where I did have that childhood where I was playing sports and martial arts and, you know, like I said, tons of friends in the neighborhood. We'd play together. And that's something that, I got to do here that I never got to do overseas because overseas we were dodging bullets and artillery shells. So it's a little different overseas than when I was here.
Right. Yeah. You told your friends here in the United States you've played war before. You've had it. So
Yeah, exactly.
here's the thing though that I kind of want to ask about. You brought it up 9/11, and at one point when you're going to join the military, your mom tells you. So I want to see if I get this right. I got to find it. I wrote it down in here. So you want to join the enemy is what she said.
So yeah, so what it was actually was one of her friends. So my mom didn't respond to that friend. So it was one of her
Okay.
friends. We were sitting together, um, and her friend looks at me and she said, "So I hear you joined the enemy." And I look at my mom, and my mom didn't say anything. She just has this sort of smile on her face. I'm like, "Are you guys serious right now?" And I ended up walking out. That way I don't flip out on them or anything. But yeah, that that was a real thing that happened that even to this day I'm like, man, why would a mother or father, whatever, just kind of sit there and allow another person to talk down to your own kid. So yeah, no, that one kind of cut me deep for a little bit, especially from the coming from my mom's friend, and then it turned into, all right, so this is the resentment or the kind of common theme within the community that is going on, right? Of, oh, I'm enjoying the enemy, or I'm did this, or I'm did that. So again, it kind of turned into me just numbing it all out, just like, all right, you know what, whatever. And because I still push forward, no matter what.
Well, and you did push forward, but there were even points in time that they were asking for advice so that their children didn't turn out like you, so that they didn't get your ideas. I mean, it's got to be so hard to balance that, just that structure in your life, like to be who you want to be and still try to appease the parents. And you even said it right there. There was a little crack in you where you say that cut me deep for a little while. Like you kept going back to it, and I understand it's the parents and stuff, but I kept wondering in the book, like, how do you continue to just be kicked around and go back and make it okay? And does that still travel forward in your life today? Like, are you still that kind of person where, and I'm not saying with people that you work with or on the job or anything like that. I'm talking about in life. Is it still that where you can still really compartmentalize that stuff and look at the person as being your mom or your dad, and just take it at that, at face value?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten pretty good at that over the years of just being able to uh, yeah, compartmentalize that and literally see that, oh, it's my mom standing in front of me, or it's my dad standing in front of me, or one of my uncles or whatever, and I'm able to just kind of just push forward past it. Every once in a while, it does get to me, kind of, the way I put it is, just like a cup that water runs, where it's too full and it flows over. It does get to me at times, but even then, when that happens, something in me, whatever it might be, just kind of just pushes me forward. And I think I write about it in the book, that, coming back from war, like when I went to war, I felt like something in me woke up, when I touched down in Iraq, and kind of got myself in this battle rhythm out there. And it's like this sort of instinct that's always been in me really came out after that.
Let's talk about that then. You go to war. This is, your parents' biggest nightmare, to fight against Muslims, and you do it, and you have no qualms about it. You even said right there that something came out of you. It changed you at a cellular level. So let's talk about, you touched down in Iraq. I want to know your thoughts, sights, smells, feelings about being there, because it's got to be at the back of your mind. You've got to hear your parents. You've got to hear that community in the back of your mind at some point.
Oh yeah, well, when I first went over there, I didn't even tell them where I was going, right? They knew I had orders to deploy. I never even told them I was in Iraq till I came home. Uh, but so they didn't really know where I was until I actually told them. So, but when I touched down, one of the first thoughts was, "Holy shit, here we go. This is real." Because I'll never forget when we were landing in Camp Anaconda, the C-130s have to do a what's called a combat drop, which means they're gonna, at 20,000 feet, and they basically crash land purposely. That way, because they're taking fire, they're getting shot at, whatever, and less likely to get hit when you're coming down that fast. It was an interesting way to land. And then, we step off, get on, step out of the C-130 on the tarmac. We go into the briefing tents, and you're hearing mortars hit here and there. And I'm like, yep, I'm definitely at war. Here we go. So as the mission went on, we got to our base and got settled in, and we were living on a small fob north of Baghdad by maybe 45, 50 miles. So it's kind of like a remote fob, which was good too, because we were less likely to hit by mortars because it was all open desert for us. So it was actually much nicer than being inside Baghdad or any of the major cities, because we didn't get the harassing mortar rounds coming in all the time, or hardly ever, because it was just open terrain for us. And first couple missions I went out, one of the first ones I did was we did a mission brief. We had to go out to the French embassy in Baghdad, where our commander had a meeting with, I forget exactly who he met with at the French embassy, but I went, and that was literally my first mission outside the wire, and I got addicted to it after that. Right, always wanted to be off base, because it was just, I felt like I had more purpose now. Especially when we got to the French embassy, and I was a sergeant at the time, and the squad leader, who's still a good friend of mine, he's actually a Connecticut state trooper now. He's been that for a long time, but he had me get out, and he's like, "Hey, Ayman, can you coordinate with these guys, with the Iraqi army? So set up perimeter, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Yeah, no problem." And I went right up to him and I spoke, Arabic. And it took them a second to realize that I was speaking Arabic, because they couldn't put in their heads that you have a U.S. soldier that speaks fluent Arabic, because they're too used to seeing interpreters or whatever else, but never a full soldier, full battle rattle and everything. So when I started talking to them and I set up everything, and they actually gave us food, water, juices, like all kinds of stuff, because I was there. And, right away, my buddy, he's like, "I mean, you are an asset out here. Like, you're going to be busy for a while." And he was right. After that, I sort of kind of took off, after that, in terms of being in theater.
Well, here's the big thing with me, and I want to get your thoughts on it. When you get there and you start hearing the mortar fire, and you're back in the Middle East and you're hearing a war going on all around you, and you said once you left the wire and you did it the first time, you were kind of addicted to it. Thinking back on your childhood, do you think it was because as a child there was nothing you could do but cry, run, hide? And now as an adult, you have complete control over your destiny with this war going on around you?
Yeah, I think so. So part of it is, I think, it's been ingrained in my DNA, So if you want, you hear these stories, of course, like, this guy was born into war. Well, yeah, I mean, pretty much, I grew up in war as a little kid. So that, I mean, to me, it was interesting. To me, it was, thinking back, when I wrote the book and I was thinking back, um, I almost felt at home, which is kind of weird, right? It just, because it just felt right where I was, and because, again, could be because of my childhood, or it could be just whatever that was inside me woke up and was like, hell yeah, this is why I'm here. And it wasn't because, the thrill of combat or anything like that. I think it was more, I have purpose, when being, especially that purpose after fighting so much within the community and all that, getting them to understand why I needed to go. Once I got there, it's like, man, if they can only see what I see and how important it is for people like me to be out there outside the wire running, doing these missions and getting the job done. And it was very telling as I, throughout the entire 18 months deployment, was very telling on how much of an impact I had on a lot of the operations we had, but just simply me talking to people.
Well, I think we can take it a step further because you kind of glossed over it, and I don't think it should be at all. When you talk about, why it was so important that your community know you be there, let's just look at you being there, though. Immediately, the first story you told of when you set up stuff and they couldn't understand a U.S. soldier speaking Arabic the way you do. And then they hooked you up with juices and everything that you need and all of these kind of things. So not only for the troops that you're supporting of American troops, you're putting other troops at ease with you there, and you're bridging that bond faster than it can be done any other way. So I think you've got to feel a certain way about being able to make both sides happy. And it's got to be a weird feeling for you because that one side had always been against you. And now you see how they came together.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I kind of made this observation while I was on the grounds of the embassy with the Iraqi army, and this observation I made was just like, you know, and that was exactly it, is me bridging two completely different cultures together. And eventually, I mean, they were like kicking around the soccer ball. We were just, it almost felt like winning hearts and minds type of mission, right? And that's where it kind of morphed in for me, where I'm like, oh man, this is straight out of, special forces doctrine, with winning hearts and minds of how to kind of, unconventional warfare and all that. And I was like, you know what, this is the way to do it, where you bridge that gap, and all of a sudden, things happen. I mean, there were so many missions that, I was a part of, whether it was recon missions or whatever. The minute I step out of that gun truck and say a couple words, man, things happened quick. It didn't take a second hesitation for the Iraqis to do what needed to get done, especially with me being there. And
So,
I felt it made my guys, my squad, that much safer, because of that interaction I had with the community, Iraqi community.
so let's talk about the shitty part of that, though. Let's flip that coin over. All of this is happening. You're bridging this divide between two different forces. You're making these things happen. And yet you still can't tell your family, the most important part of that community, everything that's going on.
No, I mean, I really couldn't, and because I knew the history of it, right? I mean, the history of me joining and the history of me growing up and all of that. I knew it was not going to be even worth my time to bring up. And at the time when I was over there, I mean, I was so busy, I really didn't even have time to think about that aspect of my life, because I had to be present for my guys, for whatever missions in front of me. So I really did not have that time to really think all that much, with my parents and family dynamics and stuff. It's only when I came home where, I mean, before we get, yeah, I don't want to get too ahead, but when I came home, there was a reason why I was so pissed off, right, all the time. Not only, yeah, seeing some crazy shit, while I was overseas, but at the same time, them, my parents and family community taking it like whatever. You didn't do much type of thing, type of mentality, right? Versus, oh no, well, I know what I've done and I know what I've seen. And, at the time, even back then, 2006, 2007, the VA was so behind on the PTSD stuff. And so there was a lot going on when I came home.
Well, and let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about what you kind of ended up doing over there. How you kind of finished out your tour and your deployment. And because I think it's very important of what you did, because I don't think you expected to do that at all when you went over there.
No, I mean, throughout my deployment, I was coordinating with various units, from SF to Marine counter intel to intel units, because we went outside the wire so much. I had so much intel on enemy movements and enemy strengths and which village is friendly to U.S. forces, which is not, and all that intel that I was able to gather. Units were seeking me out, for that intel. And, I would share that information all the time. And every time it doesn't never fail that, they'd sit there, scratch their heads, and they're like, well, we didn't have any of this information, and I think I felt it was very important for me to make sure I had the right intel, the right info for, all these units, because when it came down to kicking in doors for high value targets, well, yeah, that information is important, of what we're going to go up against or what we're going to be doing and who we're going to go after. It was really important information that I really, I kind of took it very, well, I shouldn't call it personal, but I took it like as well, yeah, personal, because it was like my intel, right? It was my work that I did that I wanted to make sure I delivered. And mind you, this is me being 22, 23 years old. So still a young guy with this, I guess, enormous responsibility of, my area of operation.
Well, don't take this the wrong way, but not only your area of operation, but you're 22, 23 years old, the ego too. There's a little bit
Yeah.
that feeds into that for sure, of kind of really figuring out who you are, that first time of figuring out who you are. And you really kind of deconstructed it over there and let it be known. So when you get done and you come back to the United States, is it a happy or sad occasion for you?
So when I came home, I had no fanfare waiting for me, with the buses that arrive. You know how you've seen the videos and movies and whatever, and I'm sure, in your neck of the woods, police details are out there for the troops when they come home, especially during the peak of the wars. I didn't have any of that, right? I actually had to get a ride from one of my friends to home because no one came to pick me up. So I showed up, and of course, my siblings loved that I got home. You know, they jumped on me, everything. Yeah, my mom and dad were happy to see me, but at the same time, I was like, yeah, whatever. I wasn't really, I was more there for my siblings than my parents. That's kind of the way I rationalized it in my head, is I wanted to see my siblings because, they were still little at the time, except my brother. He's 2 years younger than me, but, my little sisters and littlest brother, you know, that's who I really wanted to see.
So to that though, do you remember the first time you brought up that you were in Iraq to your parents?
Oh yeah.
That couldn't have gone well.
So eventually, I think I've been home maybe a few days now, and I finally was like, "Hey, where I was Iraq," and they were, one, surprised, two, mad that I actually went to Iraq, and three, they just like, again, this is, I just came home from war. And not even a month before, we had a soldier killed where, I was holding his thigh, blew up in an IED, Sergeant Allers. And, I was picking up his body parts, and you're talking, this is maybe a month or two before I came home. And then actually even a month prior to that, we did this operation. It's actually on Wikipedia. I looked it up, Operation Great Lakes. And it's just funny. It just happened to show up, and we were going after high value targets, and we had, a KIA as a result, Sergeant Worley. And, you're talking, this is just a month before I came home. So now I've got all this stuff fresh in my head, right? Coming home. And I really did not want to deal with any sort of drama that my parents would come my way. But I was so angry that anything would set me off with them. I mean, I was punching holes in walls. I was throwing things around. Like, looking back at it now, the way we're trained in the military is, once we perceive a threat, we go after it with extreme violence, right? That's just the way we were trained, and that's the way we do things. And that's all I saw, is threat after threat after threat, when I first came home. So clearly I needed some adjustment. I knew something was wrong with me, but they could not understand that something was wrong with me. So finally I had to tell them, like, hey, like, I was in Iraq. I was just at war, and you guys are giving me all this BS, and it's not helping me one little bit. I mean, I remember a story. My sister, still to this day, I don't even remember doing this. But my little sister, she said this was maybe a couple days after I came home, and she came downstairs at like around 1:32 in the morning just to check on me. And she said I was sitting up on my bed, staring at the wall, like that 1,000-yard stare. And she had to kind of shake me to snap me out of it, and took me to the living room, and we watched TV together. And apparently I fell asleep on the couch. I don't even remember any of that. And so it tells you kind of where I was, when I came home. So with them continuously just badgering me, I just snapped.
When you snap, what comes out? Like, I understand that you tell them it's not helping me and stuff, but does it get almost guttural? Like, all of these years of all of this bullshit, as you call it, that they've been doing and throwing at you, does it? I got to understand how it comes out, because it's got to be way more visceral than the way you just described, where you told them it's not helping me at all. It's got to be way more visceral than that.
Oh no, it was. And it's funny. My anger was so bad that I wouldn't even remember what I'd say. That's how you get that, red rage or white flash rage. And I just don't know. And even when I finally started seeing a therapist at the VA, and I would tell them, I said, like, I would feel my anger rise, and once it hits, I don't even remember what happened next, like what I've said. Like, I remember punching the holes in the walls, but I don't remember what set me off. What was the last thing they said that finally set me off? So that's when I knew it was dangerous grounds. I'm like, oh, this is bad. This is not good for me to be this way.
When you're punching holes in walls and you look back on it now, or even when you look back on it then, when you get a little distance on it, are you embarrassed by it? Do you understand it more? Like, what are you feeling about it now that you have that, that kind of that hindsight, and you've learned more about it? What are your feelings on it?
I think it was just part of the process of me going through whatever I was going through. I mean, it's not that I was embarrassed by it. It actually scared me more than embarrassment, because I felt like I was spiraling out of control. And I knew that living in that house, I ended up moving out to kind of heal, because I knew that still living in the community, with everything, that was not helping me one little bit. So I kind of made the decision, I'm moving out, and I moved out, and really worked on myself for a while, when I moved out. And I think another one, just like me going to the army, moving out was like best decision I made.
Well, so when you move out and you're kind of going through this and learning, how to cope with all this, are you having any trouble with medications, alcohol, We know that there's anger issues there and stuff, but are you having trouble in any other areas?
Yeah, I mean the VA at the time they gave me, oh, I remember, I'll never forget, it was like 14 different medications, and it was way too many. And I felt like a zombie. And I had to yeah, eventually over the years I cut back and all that. I mean the drinking, yes, it was an issue. Because I just didn't know how to cope. And a lot of us veterans at the time really had no idea, and there was no real structure for us on learning how to cope with what we've seen and done or did not do. That whole survival's guilt, was really, really high. It's still high even to this day. Because I even have it, why did two soldiers die under my watch where, I could have been the one gone because those, the two soldiers, they both had families, kids, all that stuff. Me, I was single at the time, 23 years old. So there was a lot of that going on in my head. And it, 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 again, it was spiraling out of control for a little while until I was able to get it back in control.
After doing the job that you've done for so many years now, though, do you still look at survivor's guilt the same? Because you've got to know by now that there's just some things that are out of your control. There's just some things that you can't change. There's nothing you could have done to change it. Does it go away at all for you, or does it stay as strong as it was in the beginning?
I think it's not as strong, but it's still there. In the beginning, obviously, it was very, very strong, very heavy on a lot of us, and on me, and especially one of them, Sergeant Allers. It was which I think I did talk about that day in the book, where we were going down the road and we were supposed to go left. He goes right, and then last minute, where he's like, "Oh no, we'll go left. You guys go right." Okay, Roger that. Whatever. Quick switch, and he gets hit by the ID and gets killed. So that one is really, even within my squad. I still talk to the guys, obviously, that I was deployed with, and every once in a while it will come up. Not as frequent as it did back then, but it still shows up. But we understand that it's not within our control, right? It is, it happened, but it's still there. You know what I mean?
So, what are you doing to work on yourself when all this is going on? What therapies, or however you want to look at it, what kind of treatment programs are you doing? We know that you realized the medication was too much, the drinking was too much, the anger was too much. So, how are we combating each of those things as you're moving through this?
So a lot of internal work, right? It, it, it's tough. And even to this day, it's still tough. But not as tough as it used to be. But it had a lot to do with me and my perspective on things, right? On how I looked at things. And I really had to, I mean, I read a lot, on top of therapy. I read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I read Seneca's work. I've read Miyamoto Musashi, the Book of Five Rings. Like I got really heavy into Stoicism and how Stoics, a lot of the sayings that they said, and some of the quotes that stick to me. Seneca saying that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and those are the things that kind of come to play when I'm kind of overthinking something or something's coming in my head, and I'm like, it's not as bad as I'm making it out to be, and remind myself all these things. And that's just, it took years to kind of get into that rhythm of learning, and writing really helped me a lot. Obviously, with the book, but with Havoc Journal, writing for them, when I first started writing for them, I mean, writing really did wonders for me, because I never used to write anything on a piece of paper. Right now, I'm pumping out articles left and right all the time, and it really, putting my feelings into words, whether it's poetry or writing an article, it really helped me rationalize a lot of what I was going through.
Well, and you bring up that quote by Seneca. You actually start a chapter in the book with that quote.
Yeah.
When you look onto it now and you see everything you've done with law enforcement, with the military, do you still believe as heavily or even more heavily in the Stoicism now just because of, I've heard a lot of guys say the difference between the military and police. Now, I was military, of course, never went to combat. As a police officer, I worked in a large city, so I can compare it on that level. But a lot of guys have said that it's harder for law enforcement, and you can attest to this, because we never get away from it. When you go into combat like you did, and then you come home and you're away from that, you get that, I guess, break time, that breather to try and work through it or try and figure out what's going on. With law enforcement, it's there every night. It's at the dinner table. It's when you go to bed. It's when you wake up in the morning. It's on the news every single day. Can you kind of talk to how you look at that Stoicism now? Because I would have to believe that you lean on it even harder. This episode brought to you by Max Belts. Guys, are you looking for a perfect accessory to wear every single day for every single scenario? Well, you've come to the right place. We all know that nothing stands up to wear and tear like a good leather belt. If you're looking for the toughest leather belt on earth, then you've come to the right place. Max Belts. They're handcrafted in the USA by veterans who are serious about their craft. And if you're looking for a belt that's tough enough for your active lifestyle and help support those who've given so much to our country, look no further than Max Belts. It's the toughest belt on the planet. It's a perfect solution for casual or dress wear and ideal for utility and firearm carry. It's the highest caliber of American craftsmanship, and it also positively impacts our military charity partners. Once again, Max Belts, you can't go wrong with them. I wear them every day. They're the toughest belt on earth. And you can find all of this and so much more at maxbelts.com.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first became a cop, once, I worked through the issues and everything, decided to become a cop. Um, that was another one where I was on my own, doing it. Parents weren't about it. They didn't even come to my graduation from the
Well,
academy, all
let
that.
me stop you right there because I want to
Yeah,
talk about that. So if we're going to get into it, your
yeah,
father was actually supposed to pin your badge on you.
yeah, yeah,
He didn't show up. He actually showed up late, which
yeah.
I feel from reading the story that was probably intentional that he showed up late.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that because you write in there, you felt alone and angry even more in the police academy than you did when you got back.
Yeah, I mean, you know, graduating a police academy, and you know as well as I do, it's kind of a big thing, right? It's a huge ceremony. It's a big deal. I mean, you're done. You're 6, 7 months at the academy, whatever academy, across the U.S. But it's hard. It's tough. It's a lot of work, right? Lots of writing to-froms and essays and all kinds of stuff and learning the laws. And so it's almost like this rite of passage when they pin that badge on you, right? And for me, yeah, I felt again angry, alone, hurt that, they would call his name and he didn't show. And just luckily, there was a friend of the family's there who was, taking pictures of me and stuff like that. He came up and pinned the badge on me. And I was also embarrassed that he had to do it, not my father, that, I double checked with him over and over again that, make sure he was going to show up. And where the graduation was in historic Fenway, sorry, not Fenway, historic Quincy Market in Boston, where where the founding fathers were. So it was a very historic area. Faneuil Hall is what I meant to say. Faneuil Hall, very historic area that we did the graduation in. So it was like really a big thing that the city of Boston put together for this graduation. So with him not being there, and kind of it showed me once again that I'm on my own doing this. Actually, one of the drill instructors, one of the drill sergeants there, um, there's one picture, me and him, he's like, face to face, and I'll never forget, he told me this. He said, you are probably one of the most motivated men I've ever met in my life. Like, because just like the self motivation, self determination in me that I have just kind of help me push. And at the time, I used that anger as a way to win a lot of things, to beat a lot of things, right? That's what I use. I use that anger that I had in me, which later on, as it grew up, in the profession, anger is not the way you want to go. But kind of, we'll start forwarding towards the stoicism part is where, yeah, over the years, I've leaned so much into stoicism and so much into um, philosophy and reading, some of the greats of the past, where I'm like, man, thousands of years ago, these guys are writing this shit that today it's relevant, and it's really important for us on this job, I feel, to really lean heavily into those types of philosophical or even maybe spiritual type reading where it will really help you throughout your career.
All right, so you become a police officer. You don't just stand by. Once again, you try to move through the ranks. You try to do different jobs. How's your personal life going? Your career is excelling. You did great in the military and all that kind of stuff. You're working on yourself, but how's your personal life going? How's the family situation, or starting a family, or even dating a girl? How is all that going at this time?
So it's everything like I've done in the past. It's just me doing it on my own, right? I didn't ask for any sort of acceptance from my family. I just went and did it, right? So I got married. I have a great kid. He's 12 now. And, early on when we started, you were asking me about, my parenting style, how it's so different. And yeah, I mean, I basically took everything that my dad did and did the opposite with my son. And, I have such a different style than him. Um, I mean, yes, there's certain aspects that I did like from him. There, certain things to be strict on and work hard and all those great attributes to have. But a lot of the things that he would say, even as growing up, I don't need you, you need me, and all that stuff is just not healthy way to kind of bond with your son, right? And that's something that with my son, I never say to him, you know. And yeah, we'll have, I might get mad at him or I hardly ever really raise my voice at him because it's just that much different I've learned of what not to do.
Okay, so with all that, when you get married on your own, when you kind of move through your career, have a child, do you still look back on it? And here's the part where I really want to know your thought on it. Do you look back and are you as angry as you were before, or as time goes and as you do more things, the police academy, getting married, having a child, does all that kind of fade away and you almost reach a, I don't know if I would use the word ignorance is bliss, where you're just like, whatever, you just kind of go through it, or is there still that anger there? Because I've got to think that there is at some point.
Yeah, I mean, so throughout my law enforcement career, I mean, I was fortunate to do some really cool things, whether it's SWAT, narcotics, federal task forces. So, I just moved right, like I said, I just moved right along, in my career and just really pushed the envelope all the time. And with, with my parents and over the years and everything, that yeah, ignorance is bliss, right? Sometimes my wife will ask me, "Hey, what are your parents up to?" It's like I have no idea and I don't care. So yes, part of it is ignorance is bliss, and the other part of it is just when I do get more involved with my parents, the angrier I get because of just how just it just frustrates me, and then I have to back away again.
Which
You know,
and I completely understand. the thing that I go back to, though, is what we talked about in the beginning, where you said, yeah, that cut pretty deep for a while. You still keep attempting that relationship. Is it is it for is it for something for you? Is it for something for your family? I'm just really trying to understand it, because you can't get punched in the gut more than you have, really, by the family, and to continue to go back and go after that stuff. What's the end goal there? I've got to understand your end game on it.
So I mean, to me, the end game is just to kind of show that no matter what, or no matter, well, not so much no matter what, but it's just more to show my son, one, to show my son that, you know, me, I'm not the pushover type in terms of like, you know what, yeah, I'm gonna cut you off for the rest of my life or whatever. Like I'm never that kind of guy. I'm always the kind of guy that, I mean, we're in a professional law enforcement where we face problems head on, right? So no matter what, that's just always been me, is I'll face a problem head on, no matter what. And with my parents, it's a problem that has been a problem for, most of my life. But in the end, to me, it's the end game is just to be more or less available for my siblings more than anything else. Um, because I know with them, they have their spats with my parents, and I give them advice. And my brother, he's funny. My younger brother, who's 2 years younger than me, he tells me, he's like, man, he's like, if I only saw what you saw much earlier, I would have been out of this family a long time ago. And it took him a while, a little bit longer for him to kind of see what I saw. And he even admits it, like, man, he's like, to him, he was just ignorant to it all. He didn't realize what was actually happening in the household until he finally opened his eyes.
But he says he would be out of that family. You decided to kind of stick it out. Does do you ever, is that part of why he didn't leave, was because you told him, look, man, yeah, it's this, but it gets better? Or how did that work out? Because it seems to me like your siblings, like you just said, if they would have figured it out a little sooner, you wouldn't have to worry about this parent thing where you kind of have to make nice with them to be with the siblings, and you all siblings could just be off in your own, doing your own thing.
Yeah. I mean, it, as I guess as the eldest, if you want to say it culturally, I guess part of me still has some of the cultural attributes, if you want to call it, or cultural norms. Is the oldest always sticks it out, no matter what, with the family, good, bad, whatever. The oldest is always there, and where kind of what my as my wife describes it, all I do now is just minimize the crazy, right? So I don't get as involved unless I'm asked to get involved. But then when I do get involved, I literally tell my dad, I'm like, well, all right, if you want me to get involved, but you're not going to talk to me for the next 6 months, because I'm going to tell you some things that you don't want to hear. So I come with a warning now.
I wouldn't think you would have to after this long, but I guess, sometimes parents, and even looking at us as parents, we don't learn. It takes a while for it to set in. All right, I want to talk about being a cop, because you've spent a lot of
Yep.
your life. What year was it exactly that you're out of the academy and you start life in the streets?
So October 2007 is when I graduated the academy
Okay.
and then started working.
Yeah, so you and I are almost exactly. I started in September of '06, graduated in, I think, May of '07. And then you, of course, go through all your street training and probation
Yep.
period and things like that. So we both started right around the same time. I think we can both agree that policing has changed immensely since that day.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we look at policing now, it is not what it was, even when we were on the job.
Absolutely. I mean, and here's the thing that I talk about. When you see it, just the difference in, we can use technology as a big thing. We were just getting, cameras in every vehicle, not body cams yet, but cameras in every vehicle, being able to record every traffic stop, mobile cameras being put out around the cities and things like that. I want to talk to you about what you think the difference is in how you policed back then and how you police now, because I think with age and me, I can look at the situations a little differently. And I was told when I was very young in my career about the old bull and the young cow and going down the hill. And you know the part of that. I think as I've gotten older in my career, I've done that. So can we talk a little about how you've evolved throughout your career?
Yeah, early on in my career, I was this hard-hitting, just going after bad guys type of cop. I mean, technically, I still am, just older and wiser in how I do it. I think that's the biggest difference. One thing that really kind of, to me, what really changed policing the first time when you kind of saw it and felt it is when President Obama had to say something about what happened in Cambridge, which Cambridge at the time when I was working in the city of Boston for the transit police, Cambridge was just right across the water, literally. It's right there. And I'll never forget in dispatch, in our dispatch center, when we're watching the news and he says what he said, like almost every single cop in that room was like, oh shit. Like that was a big deal back then. And I think that's when we really realized right away policing is about to change.
I think perception of policing, I wouldn't even say policing change, perception of policing change.
Perception. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, perception.
Because,
yeah.
because here's the thing. You're talking about the most powerful man in the United States, and some would say in the world, weighing in on something that's at a local or at most a state level that happened. And I think it changes people's perception on how we address policing as a society.
Yeah.
So, in your thoughts on it, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Because we're going to go through a couple things. You and I both policed through COVID-19. We policed through all the riots that happened. There has been major things that have happened. Elections, major, elections that happen. When you look at your career and you look back as you first did it, what do you think you do differently now?
Definitely a lot more taking our time with things, right? Now it's about, I've always been good at talking people into handcuffs, no big deal. Like, I got the gift of gab, right? Verbal judo, whatever you want to call it. I still have that, but now it seems that the ask, tell, make world, right, is all of a sudden no longer there. I think that's why you have such an increase in cops getting assaulted, is because now we are tasked or are required to take our time even more, negotiating why we are arresting somebody. And to me, that's still ridiculous to me, even to this day. I'm like, why am I even have to explain this? Like as if I'm giving somebody, a civil citation for something. It's like, no, this dude's under arrest for domestic violence. It is what it is. See you later. But I think that, that's the big difference I found today. And also what I found, compared to back then to today. Back then, we knew our use of force. We knew the rules we operated in. Today, those rules change like the wind, so one day one thing could be good and the next day and it's no longer good. Versus back when we started, yeah, use of force is use of force and that's it. There's no questions asked. Yeah, some dude tried to punch you, you punched them back, good to go. Now, if some dude punches you, you have to explain why you had to punch him back a lot more. So that's and I'm sure you see it with the young guys, that hesitation, right? And it kills me to see that hesitation because you and I both know that hesitation is what gets you killed, right? If you make that decision, you got to go do it.
Well, and the point I want to bring up that you talk about in the book is a big point, was when COVID-19 happened.
Yeah.
And you talk about that it was only essential workers. But the problem with only essential workers and no one else being out, criminals are out. And they're running rampant where you were, where I am, because there's so many precautions being taken. I think you put in the book that it was supposed to be the worst virus ever, and the liquor stores were still open. And it was such a dichotomy to you where that happened. And you get into this whole other sphere of, okay, well, now we have to be safe, and now we have to do this, and we still have to police, but we're not really getting any policing because, as you point out in the book, there's no courtrooms anymore, and the DAs are not coming in. And then they're doing release programs where they're getting people out of prison because they think that the COVID-19 vaccine is going to wipe out prisons. And there's all these things where we have this influx of crime and all of these different things into society. And no one's thinking that the people that are on the front line, the first responders, are dealing with that. And you can look at it from two different perspectives. You can look at it from when you went to combat and everything that was happening. And then when you look at it here, in combat, I think you would agree that you had pretty much the backing of who you were working for. And as long as you followed ROEs and all that kind of stuff, you were good. You fall into a slippery slope, though, when you get here and all of this policing and you're getting this jump up in crime where numbers are going to want to be taken away. But on the other hand, too, you have to do it differently so it doesn't work as fast or it doesn't work as well. Can we talk about that with you? Because you pointed out in the book for a chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, with COVID-19, like I was just saying in the book, and then you were mentioning that, the courts were closed, DAs aren't around, so crime is running rampant. So because part of our Constitution is a quick and speedy trial, right? So when we arrest somebody, there's requirement by the criminal justice system to get them through the process and go. No, now we couldn't do it, so we had to summons everybody. That's it, unless it's a crazy murder or whatever. But even then, I wouldn't know what the heck we would do if we end up catching a murder suspect. And all right, well, what now? Courts are closed. He's not going to be able to be arraigned. So it was a very trying time for law enforcement. I remember at the time I was still doing narcotics, and we were following this target around because bad guys don't care dealing drugs, and the only cars that are out there are drug dealers and narc cars. And I'm like, and I finally go on the radio. I'm like, guys, is this even worth it? Like, this dude has to know by now that he's got, all of a sudden all these cars all around him all the time, So it was so different and such a bizarre time to be a cop, especially around COVID-19. And, it really, really set us back a lot.
Let's move forward a couple of, I don't even know, a couple of years, maybe a year from that, where we get into all the riots, when everything happens, when cities are being set on fire and people want stuff done, but it's not being able to be done because the courts are still just coming back online. The DAs are still coming back online. Do you remember when all of this happened and what your thoughts were? And the reason I want your thoughts is because I would have to think at a point, you're a kid from Lebanon by way of Liberia to the United States. You make this life for yourself. You fight for this country. You come back. You become a police officer. You live this right kind of life. And you look around. Is there ever a point where you go, what the fuck was everything I did for? Because it's falling apart all around me.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it all the time. I have a very, very close net friends of fellow combat vets, and every single one of us, and this is besides me being, from overseas, but all of us are saying, what the fuck did we fight for? Or what are we fighting for? The ones who are still cops, half the time is this even worth it? Half the time, you get into a use of force where no matter what, you're second guessed right away because the court of public opinion is far more important than the laws of the land. Um, it really makes me second guess kind of, well, should I stick this out, or is it time for me to pack up and say, see you later? But then I go back on the other side of me, right? There's like this two sides always, fighting each other. the other side of me says, well, there's actually real victims out there that need help. I mean, a couple major cases I worked when I was a detective. One of them was a sexual assault of a 6-year-old, and I had to work that case for 2.5 years. And, it was a tough case just for me because at the time my kid was around the same age. And, as well as I do, when you have these assholes in the interview room, all I want to do is just choke them out. I just like, dude, you shouldn't even be breathing right now. These are all going through my head. But, so I think about these things and I'm like, man, there are real people that really need help. And, I'm that guy. And I think I even said during one interview with BBC, if not me, then who? Who's going to go do it? Or who's going to have that willingness to, you know, take that extra mile for somebody else? Because it's not, to me, call me cynical or whatever, but sometimes it's like there's not enough people out there that are doing that. There's a very few that are willing to push themselves at, and you can tell by the national average of who becomes cops and who joins the military. It's always less than 1% of the U.S. population that are actually doing this type of work. So again, I go back, if not me, then who?
Okay. And I'm glad you bring that up because I want to play devil's advocate to you for a minute.
Yeah.
So first, let's talk about the victims that you bring up, that there are people out there that really need you. I think you would agree in the time and space that we're in right now, it's almost the victims have less rights than the accused.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I look at that point, and let's just keep that one kind of with a pin cushion or a pin in it for a second. Then I look at you say, if not me, then who? At what point is it not worth your mental health anymore, not worth you wearing yourself down? Because let's not fool ourselves, and let's put it very openly out there. Suicide rate is climbing through the roof at an exponential rate in law enforcement, first responders, people that are dealing with this in and out every single day. At what point does your mental health, does your family and your physical being, when is it worth more in your mind?
So that's the thing, that those are the two sides that I always fight with, right? It's always, all right, part of me says, you know what, enough's enough, right? Or it's getting there to that point, getting close to that point where, in the next couple of years, I'll be 20 years on the job. Then it's like, okay, time to hang it up. Or, I guess the warrior side of me, if you want to call it that, says, oh no, you can stick it out a little longer. Like, you're needed. It's a weird type of fight that I constantly have within myself almost every single day, where, when I go into work, as well as I do, sometimes you go into work and you're dealing with some of the stupidest things you could even think of. And you're like, really? This is what I'm doing now? Or could be a day where it's nonstop, one extreme thing after another. And you're like, God damn, what, is there a full moon out today or, tonight, or what's going on? So it definitely, I definitely agree with you, right? At what cost is it to my mental health and to my family and all that? Well, to me, it's not worth it, for my family, right? To take care of my family, because what good am I if I am mentally just checked out, to them? So that those are the two sides that I always wrestle.
Yeah, and the whole thing is, I don't think, and I talk about it a lot on the show, we talk a lot in law enforcement about making sure that the mental health of our officers is at our utmost. We are a long ways from that. We talk about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
When you have to go to counselors that your department chooses that you need to go to, we'll cover this or we'll cover that. We'll cover these treatments, but we won't cover those treatments. As we all know, there's no magic bullet to therapy. There's no magic bullet to a treatment. Everyone is going to be different going into it. Everyone is going to react to it differently. And I think we're trying to fool ourselves by saying, yeah, we've got this under control. We're really getting a handle on this because I think we're so far from it. I think we've got some great ideas out there, and I think some things have been put into practice, but we're so far away from it right now. I can't imagine the numbers going down anytime soon.
No, and that's something actually. So I teach around the state here, and one thing I teach about is kind of mental health wellness for law enforcement officers and all that. And I always say that in law enforcement, we are probably 50 years behind the military when it comes to mental health, because the military has done some great strides and work to get mental health and wellness up to a certain standard in the military. Still need a lot of work, but at least they're doing something. Law enforcement, like you said, it's all lip service. That's all I see, right? Like, up here post, they're mandating this mental health and wellness programs for law enforcement, but it's all just smoke and mirrors, right? I don't see anything that's coming down from post to deal with, the high suicide rates or the high depression rates or the overwork, burned out, type of thing. I mean, I talk about this statistic all the time that, or this medical study all the time where it says, for a body to recover from extreme stress, like, job first responder, firefighters, whatever, it takes about 48 hours for your body to recover from that. Well, if you're in law enforcement, you work 4 days on, 2 days off. Well, those 2 days off are supposed to be your recovery days. But guess what? You're getting ordered in, you're getting called in for overtime, you're doing this, you're doing that, whatever it might be. So you never have that break that your body needs, and that is a huge issue within the law enforcement community, is that they're not really looking at why a cop reacts a certain way, or why this cop got this complaint, about this citizen who, he or she yelled at. Well, did you look to see what call they were on prior? Oh, they just dealt with a SIDS death. Now they went to talk to this lady about, her bike gone missing. Like, so this cop is struggling, but you're sending them to call after call after call, right? No matter what. So I think it's it needs a lot of work is what I'm trying to say with mental health.
And I think so too. And even more than the call to call load, I think a lot of guys in the job these days, and if you disagree with me, please tell me, but I think a lot of them know what the bad guy's going to do. And this is a weird kind of world we're in right now. We know bad guys are going to be bad guys and what they're going to do to us. More cops and more first responders are worried about what the command staff and what the people they work for are going to do to them more than they're worried about getting hurt on the job. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. The biggest, there's this kind of thing where I think the biggest enemy for law enforcement is not the outside world, it's from within, right? And it's just, you have some of the most toxic leaders in law enforcement. And no matter how many chiefs I hear that tell me, oh, we care about the men, we care about this, we care about that. No, you don't. You just care about your own ego, right? There's a reason why chiefs become chiefs, certain people become chief, is because they have a certain ego that loves being stroked. To me, again, this is what I see.
I
Now,
100% agree with you.
yeah, and now there are extreme rarities of chiefs. There are two for close friends of mine. They're both chiefs. They're the type that they're a cop's cop. Like, they've been street cops their entire lives, SWAT, all that awesome stuff, and they are phenomenal leaders. But that's only two out of the thousands that I've run into, right? And to me, the culture of law enforcement, the way it recruits when it comes to like the command staff, needs to be revamped and redone and reworked, where it shouldn't just only be a test, right? Or it shouldn't only be an oral board. It should be a combination of many things. Well, yeah, you're a great test taker. Well, it's because you didn't take any calls. You studied the entire time, hiding in the station or doing whatever. So no, you are not going to get promoted as a result, right? Versus a cop who's active out on the streets, done some really good impacts in the community, right? Done some really great work, has the creds, available and test decent, right? That would be the individual you'd want in a more leadership type position, right? And to me, being a leader in this profession is not about stars, bars, or stripes at all, right? It's about who you are as an individual, right? And I think I spoke about this where I've always hated these ethics seminars or these ethic workshops we're mandated to do on and I said, listen, I was
Legitimacy.
like, yeah, exactly. And I tell them, I always say, I'm like, if you have to learn on how to be an ethical human being, then you shouldn't be on this job. You know, like there's got to be a certain moral compass you have to be a cop. And if you need to learn how to be ethical, then you shouldn't be on this job.
100% agree. And I would even go into the fact about the chief that you just said. I just lost one to retirement. He's the greatest, and I have no problem saying that. I don't want to say his name, but the greatest leader that I've ever worked for. Military, police work. I mean, he just made sure his guys knew, I'm here for you if you need me. He checked on people's families. I mean, he just went above and beyond to do. And he retired. He got to the end and he was like, it's time for me to go. It's time for me to be with the family. And I hope I can see more people do that. What I see right now, and one of the reasons I started the show and I talk about mental health on here so much, is that you would see these guys do 15, 20, 25 years, 30 years. I've got a guy on my department that's over 50 years right now. 50 years, if you think about that.
Yeah.
And they retire and they're dead within 6 months. And this is first responders, this is military, this is law enforcement, this is all of these different things. And we don't take time to figure out ourselves, figure out what we want to do in life. You mentioned it. Writing was immensely helpful for you, but you have so many people that can't figure that out until it's too late. And that's what I'm hoping to do with the show, is tell people there's a whole second chapter out there. You just got to open your eyes for it. This is not the entire world. You've got to focus on family and your children and hobbies and all of these kind of things away from the job. And I think you've done it. And I think it segues perfectly into our last kind of thing that we need to talk about. Your writing with the Havoc Journal, your podcasting that you do, the book, all of that kind of stuff. Let's talk about how you've taken all this experience, everything that we've talked about in this conversation tonight, and kind of put it into this whole new love and this desire to bring this topic to the people.
Yeah. So, again, just fortunate. And I think, by fate or because I don't think things happen by coincidence when I meet certain people and get to know them and start working with them. There's a reason for everything. And, my passion, not just with writing, but with mental health and wellness within the veteran community and the first responder community kind of drove me towards this organization here that's based here out of Massachusetts called 22 Mohawks. And they help veterans with getting whether it's service animal or service dog or an emotional support dog, therapy dog, anything like that. And it's run by a combat vet, Dave Camposano, really, really good friend of mine. And, he brought me on the board with them because our passions kind of align. And, one of the first things I started with him was this airborne retreat. So we take 20 veterans down to Florida, X-35, and we do a static line jump with them. And you don't need experience for it because it's an airborne school. You'll learn how to do it. And to see the looks on these veterans and these first responders' faces, it's like they're alive again, right? It's amazing the amount of healing that happens in that 1 week when we take them down there. And with my writing in Havoc, I mean, I encourage everybody to write, just write, and you'll be surprised on what actually comes out when you actually write. I was surprised personally, when you just kind of sit back and think for a second and just start writing, and you'll be surprised on some of the things that come out. I mean, like with my book, just it's surprising, right? When you put all those feelings down. Podcasting, similar thing, kind of like what you're doing with your show. Mine is, Project Sapient. This season is all about resilience and mindset, right? And we had Chuck Ritter on, and talk about an amazing story about resilience. And we talked through it all, and and some others. We've had doctors, Dr. Chris Free, talking about operator syndrome, and just the type of people that gravitate towards me or towards guys like us. It's really amazing because it kind of shows that we're on the right path, right? On, talking about these things, because it needs to be talked about. And that's one thing, unfortunately, in law enforcement, we're so closed off. And part of it is, I blame ourselves for a lot of our problems, is because as a profession, we keep everything internal, right? We don't really bring it out, known to the public or even known to other officers within the department. Like, hey, I'm struggling. He's taking a week off. You guys go check on him. If he needs something, whatever. Like, you never hear of that, though. You never hear of a department that knows one of their officers struggling and says, hey, you know what? Go take a break, or go do this retreat, go for a month, where it doesn't factor into your vacation time, sick time, whatever, but it's built into, let's say, the contract, if you want to talk union talk, right? Where it's just, it's just built in, where you just go and they check on you, right? You don't get that sense, especially after COVID-19. It's like all of a sudden non-existent, where we're no longer really taking care of each other like we should be.
Well, when you bring that up, it's funny when you say how, we keep kind of things close to the vest. If you notice, neither one of us, and I don't even know if you and I talking offline have mentioned our departments, or maybe we have once, but we don't even let the public know what departments that we work for, because we want to keep that close to the chest.
Yeah.
So I understand exactly what you mean. I think we're a long ways from it. I think the stuff that you and I are doing, I hope, is helping. Even one person is great for me to help just one person on it. But you're exactly right. Let's talk about what's next for you. I mean, you've got so many kind of irons in the fire. You and I are both reaching that retirement age. So what do you got going next?
So I like teaching a lot around, obviously around the state, and teaching younger cops. It's sort of kind of become my next passion, I guess, if you want to call it. And the stuff I teach is more on the stress exposure side, stress inoculation side, where I put cops through a battery of things and basically make them feel how they're going to feel out on the road. So whether it's the tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, the anxiety, whatever it might be, get them exposed to it. That way, when they go into a scenario, they're doing something, you're building that neuroplasticity in your brain, where you're like, oh, okay, I remember this. When you're going through an actual situation, you're like, oh, I remember what this felt like, and I know what to do, should this happen. So that's kind of where I've kind of shifted a little bit of my focus. Like, one of the irons in the fires that I got going right now is just teaching this type of methodology and training, because you know as well as I do, policing, we don't get enough. I mean, we'll get on SWAT teams and very specialized units, but on the patrol level, you hardly see this type of training on the patrol level. And people get surprised when I tell them that. They're like, really, you don't train that way? I'm like, no, patrol doesn't train this way. They should, but they don't get trained this way. And I've got other things going on with 22 Mohawks, where we're getting ready to do we're calling it a Operation Medevac. It's kind of like doing the Mogadishu Mile, except it's a 4 mile run with a litter and a 130-pound dummy, and we're wearing rucksacks, and we're going to run for 4 miles, kind of just to honor them, and we're raising money for that to keep funding the dogs and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of things I've got going on down throughout the summer that I'm going to be busy doing.
All right, let's talk about where people can find this amazing book.
Yeah, so on Amazon, you can find it right on Amazon. You type in The Resolute Path, and please, by all means, purchase it, and feel free to let me know what you guys think of it.
Physical and digital form.
Yep. Yeah, both. It's on Kindle, and it's actually on Apple iBooks recently, I found out.
I
So,
think it's also on. I saw a new one today too that it was on. And I can't remember what it was. I think it's on one of the other readers like Noob or Kobe or something like that.
right.
It's on one of those. So it's on that too. Guys, don't miss out on this book. If you got to hear a crazy, crazy fucking story about how a guy gets to where he's at, it doesn't get much crazier than this, guys. Check it out, The Resolute Path. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it, as we said, Barnes and Noble. There's a bunch of different websites that you can find it on. Let's talk about where people can find you on social media, where they can find the podcast, and, where they can find out a little more about you.
Yeah. The podcast is called Project Sapient, and the Instagram is Project Sapient is where you can find me. I actually recently started TikTok. I don't know how long that's going to last, but I actually threw into the TikTok, so we'll see how long I can put up with TikTok. But you can find me there, and people can email me too at projectsapient2020 @gmail.com. I get a lot of emails from cops from all over the country all the time, and it's nice to hear from people, see how they're doing. And yeah, and I'm the type that when I tell you email anytime, email me anytime. And if you want to talk on the phone, we'll talk on the phone too. So I'm always available for anybody.
All right, man. I'm so happy that you came on here. We have a couple more things in store with you, your podcasting co host. We're going to bring you guys back on to talk about the podcasting. We're going to hopefully get him on his own too, so we can kind of merge you guys' stories together into the Project Sapient. Um, you know, I think that m- most people, and I'm talking about your journey that you've done, just don't realize what it's worth to do it the way you've done it, to really prove yourself in the world. And I was so honored that you came on the show to talk about it, man. I'm so happy that you did this and that we got together. Guys, check out this book, check out this man, check out his podcast. It is awesome. And now that we've talked about him and where we can find him, let's talk about where you can find me. As always, you can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD podcast, and you can find me on YouTube where all these conversations, they're in video form. But your one-stop shop, DTDpodcast.net. It's got everything, audio, video. Ayman's got his own page, pictures of his past, pictures of him right now. His story more complete than you got on this show right here. All of his links, everywhere you need to find the book, it's all right there. DTDpodcast.net. Make sure you go there. Be a friend, tell a friend, like, subscribe, do all those different things you can on all the social media sites, YouTube, all of those. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. That's Ayman. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. We're out of here. See ya.